In today's episode, we're going to talk about the three things the Bulls need to do in the trades, free agency, and signing players. We're going to talk about what they need to do this offseason to kind of improve this team. We're going to get to all that and more right after this.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily podcast on the Chicago Bulls, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. That's Game Time. All right. So when you look at the Bulls and the offseason that they have ahead of them, there's a couple of different things that we need to attack, we need to focus on, and a couple of different ways that the Bulls can improve this team this offseason. And the first one we're going to talk about is the first one that comes up, and that is the draft. Now, you may say, Haize, the Bulls have no draft picks in this draft. How can they use the draft to improve? Well, there is a couple of different scenarios in which the Bulls can walk away with a draft pick. One of the most likely ones, and ones kind of everybody's watching out for, is what happens with the Bulls' own draft pick in this draft. It is top 4 protected. The Bulls have a 8% chance of it 8.3, I think, chance of it falling in that top 4, and a 1.8% chance of it being the number 1 overall pick. And if that does happen, now let's be clear here, right? I don't think that it's likely. More likely than not, the Bulls are not going to walk away with their own draft pick in this year's draft. But if they do, that not necessarily makes this everything that we went through this season worth it at all, but it immediately allows the Chicago Bulls a chance to really add a high-level talent, a young talent at that, to this team and extend that window, right? And keep in mind, there's not a championship window that exists for the Bulls right now. But if they do get lucky and have that pick fall in the top 4, it absolutely allows them, to have a huge influx of talent that otherwise they just would have not been able to add. And when you look at the players that are selected to go kind of in that top 4 area, of course, you have Victor Wembanyama, who is the prize of this draft. And if the Bulls walk away with having the luck to be able to draft Victor Wembanyama, I'll tell you what right now. I said this before when we were live before. If the Bulls walk away this season with the number 1 overall pick, I'm going to be here on a live stream swinging my shirt around my head, playing Petey Pablo in the background, and you don't want to know what I'm going to be drinking. So that's if they get a chance to draft Victor Wembanyama. Do I think that that's likely? No. But then when you look at the other players, the high-level players in this draft, of course, Scoot Henderson's the next one up, kind of the de facto number 2. But then if you look at the Bulls fall in 3 or 4, right, there's a couple of different things they can do. So you look at the Thompson brothers there, right, that you could draft at either the 3 or 4 position. But then you look at Brandon Miller, right, a modern-day forward, 6'9", 200 pounds, only 20 years old, will be 21 years old, I think, by the start of the season. But what he can be, especially when you look at kind of a long-term projection next to Zach LaVine, great upside there. Or you have what me and Pat have kind of discussed on this show before. That could the Bulls then use it if the let's say the pick falls in the 4, right? Let's say it falls in number 4, and the Bulls aren't necessarily enamored with the talent at number 4. What if they do use that number 4 overall pick to bring in and to facilitate a trade for another superstar to kind of bring in here? That's kind of the things that high level, right? Bulls got to get lucky for that to happen. Don't think that that's likely to happen at all. Just me being a realistic Bulls fan, I'm not looking at that being a likely scenario for this team. Where do things have happened? We did get Derrick Rose with a 1.7% chance. So, hey, you never know. I know some people are already probably thinking, well, Haize, we got Derrick Rose on, and you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But I said it before. It'll take a luck of God for us to get the number 1 overall pick, and God ain't been listening to the Bulls all season. He ain't been listening to us all season. So, but outside of that, right, how else can the Bulls end up in this draft? And this is one of the scenarios that we've touched on briefly here. We didn't talk about it a lot, but we did touch on it briefly. And that is the chance that Portland, being motivated to kind of remove the protections from their pick. For those that don't know right now, the protections on Portland's first round pick that they owe to the Chicago Bulls, it's a simple thing. If they make the playoffs, we get the pick. but it's protected so far out that it's basically removed any chance of the Portland Trailblazers trading any of their first round picks if they do want to try to get a high level talent to pair next to Dame Lillard. So there's a couple of things that they could do, right? The Bulls could absolutely look to, or try to hope that they can facilitate something and get that New York Knicks pick from the Portland Trailblazers that the Blazers are getting. Or the Bulls, if they're even luckier, could very well say, hey, Portland, let's remove the protections from the pick next season, meaning in the 2024 draft, regardless if you make the playoffs or don't make the playoffs, we get that pick, right? Or they could say that with this draft pick. I doubt that the Portland Trailblazers are going to be willing to do that. But again, you never know. And especially with Dame Lillard even coming out and saying, hey, he don't want no more 19-year-olds on the team, right? And he didn't say it disrespectfully. He's just talking about his desire to compete, and he doesn't want any more 19-year-olds. He does not want to be part of a rebuild. So could the Bulls work something out, right, in which they get Portland's pick or that New York Knicks pick that's owed to the Portland Trailblazers? Could they get that pick, which right now it'll be 23, and that allows them entryway into the NBA draft? Now, I haven't done my draft analysis yet to really know what type of level of talent you can get there down at number 23, but there is absolutely something that could be said that the Bulls could try to facilitate a situation with Portland in which they still walk away with a pick in this year's draft. Now, again, that is outside of just the Bulls' control. It really is up to the Portland Trailblazers GM. Is just how much flexibility does he want to add to the team by moving off one of the picks, right, and removing either a protection or sending that New York Knicks pick out. Could they also be interested in DeMar, which we'll talk about in the last section, which we'll talk about trades. But that's one of the scenarios as well. The Bulls can get in this draft, right? But again, it's going to take some luck. It's going to take some things out of their control. And as we know, we have not been very lucky this season. But could we get lucky in the trying to get entryway into that draft? There's that possibility as well. Again, I just wanted to be thorough on how I talked about the Bulls offseason and what they need to do. And the draft is a one that we do need to look out for. Like I said before, do not really expect it to happen. I just don't. We don't have a second round pick in this at all. If I had to put a probability on the Bulls getting into the draft this year, I'll probably put it at 20%. I think I give it a 20% chance that the Bulls somehow find their way into the NBA draft, either via their own pick, either via a deal with Portland, or maybe even something unforeseen that we see. But either way, I don't necessarily think that that's the answer. Now, if the Bulls get a top 4 pick, I'm looking at the talent there and I'm saying, no, you take that. You take that chance. But keep in mind, we have a higher probability that pick is going to be number 11, and then we'll send that off to the Orlando Magic. But if the Bulls do get lucky, and they can, and then, like I said, you look at the top-level talent net, Victor Wembanyama, Scoot Henderson, Brandon Miller, the Thompson brothers. I'm looking at those 5 players all bring something at a position that we need, honestly. You look at Victor Wembanyama being the new prototype of a center, theoretically, if he can stay healthy. You look at Scoot Henderson and what he can be as a point guard in the NBA, a scoring point guard that can also do some pretty damn good facilitating. You look at Brandon Miller being kind of the modern-day swing player, and with his frame, 6'9", 200 pounds, you got to think over his NBA career, he's probably going to add 10 to 15 pounds. Wouldn't mind the Bulls adding him. And then you look at the Thompson brothers. Amin Thompson is a shooting guard, point guard / and then you have Asar Thompson, who is a shooting guard / small forward. All things that we can use on this team. And the bigger question is if the Bulls do get lucky enough to get in that draft, how does that really change their game plan this offseason, right? Let's say the Bulls do get the number 1 overall pick. Does that really, really change some things, right? Does that change their total attack, or do they just look at it as another asset that they're adding, and they kind of keep the same course? What does that mean for Vooch if the Bulls were to get Victor Wembanyama? What does that mean for Kobe White if the Bulls were to get Scoot Henderson, right? Those are some questions that you have to ask yourself there. But again, I don't think that it's one that's probably going to happen. I don't feel like that's likely that the Bulls get in the draft, but putting a 20% chance that the Bulls get into the draft. Next up, though, we're going to talk about free agency and how the Bulls can get into or attack free agency with their own free agents. We're going to focus on our own free agents here. We're not going to really talk about free agents they can go out and sign. We're going to focus on our own free agents. But before we get into that, you guys know, if you've been around here long enough, you know what we're going to do. I got to talk to you guys about some of our sponsors here, and we're going to get into the first one here, and that's going to be Game Time. Now, me and Pat have been telling you guys about Game Time for a while now. It's the place to get last-minute tickets. If you're not tuned in with Game Time, you need to be. Forget planning months in advance. Game Time has details on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest-growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. Get images of the seat before you buy so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. Buy tickets in a matter of seconds, 2 taps, and you're set. Snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem the code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. All right, y'all. So next up, we got to talk about another one of our sponsors here, and that one is FanDuel. Now, again, you guys have heard about FanDuel a lot here. If you listen to Locked On Bulls, and so grand slams, no hitters, and double plays are back. And there's no better place to get in on MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. That's because right now, new customers can step up to the plate with a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon, sign up. Place your first bet and get a $1,000 back in bonus bets if you don't win. So don't miss out your chance to get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to FanDuel.com/lockedon to sign up. FanDuel, official sports partner of Major League Baseball. All right, y'all. Now, the next thing that we have to talk about is our own free agents. Now, the Bulls have, I think, set to have 8 possible free agents. That's depending on players that opt out and opt in. We're not going to get heavily into that. We're going to kind of focus on a couple of things here, right, with this, and that's Nikola Vucevic and Kobe White. Derrick Jones Jr. has already basically said he's going to opt in. Andre Drummond, the last thing that I read, said that, there's some feeling that he may also opt in, which is kind of surprising. I really did think that Drummond, with the way that he was treated kind of by head coach Billy Donovan, that he was more than likely not going to leave, but seems like there's some conversation around there. So right now, the Chicago Bulls, with their cap holds, are set to be $30 million into the luxury tax. Now, that is because of a few different things. One, that is because of the cap hold for Nikola Vucevic right now is $33 million. That's his cap hold. Doesn't mean that that's necessarily what he's going to sign for, but for those that know what cap holds are, so basically when you have your own free agents and you're going into free agency, they basically block off part of your salary cap and designate it for what that player may sign for. I forget how they calculate it. I'm not about to get into all that. It is what it is. They calculate it how they calculate it. But right now, Nikola Vucevic's cap hold is slated to be $33 million. Now, if he signs for less than that, if you can get Vooch at a base level contract of $18 million, and you can also sign Kobe White for a base contract of $14 million. And then I even factored into this. I did this over on Chicago Bulls Central today. If you even factor in Kobe White, if you can re-sign Kobe White to his qualifying offer, which his qualifying offer is $5.2 million, right? And the reason why I do think that Ayo Dosunmu may sign for that qualifying offer, look at it from Ayo's perspective. He had one good season, one terrible season. He may take a 1-year deal to kind of bet on himself and to get back out in free agency. Rather than Ayo lock himself up into a long-term contract that he and his agent may feel is not going to represent the value of him, there's a chance he may take that qualifying offer and just run it back. Now, that may bring its own PTSD. The last time we had a player just take their qualifying offer and let that ride, I believe, was Ben Gordon, who then ended up leaving us and going to the Detroit Pistons. But, it is what it is. And when you look at things that AK may look, especially if he still does value Ayo, which it seems like he still thinks that they're, and again, we saw Kobe take a leap, right? Maybe that 1-year qualifying offer is the best bet for all teams. It's for all parties, I should say, right? And Ayo probably isn't going to go out. When you look at the increase that is for Ayo, Ayo's making, I think, $1.8 million this season. A $5.2 million deal is a considerable raise for Ayo Dosunmu, albeit for one season. And if you bet on yourself, you can go out and get more money. But again, That's probably unlikely, admittedly. But if you can re-sign Nikola Vucevic for 3 years, $54 million, that works out to about $18 million annually. You can re-sign Kobe White for 4 years, $56 million, and $14 million annually. That would then still leave the Bulls, theoretically, their full mid-level exception, which is $11.4 million, their biannual exception of $4.4 million. And if they re-sign Kobe and Vooch and Dosunmu to those contracts that I mentioned, they can use their full mid-level exception and still be $750,000 below the luxury tax, which that's what we try to avoid here. We all know that. And if that happens, again, it'll take some luck, right? That's if Vooch even signs for that low. But if you can re-sign for Vooch for anything below his cap hold, it kind of frees up some money. So really, when you look at the Chicago Bulls, their ability to add free agents, keep in mind, I know some people are going to say, well, let Vooch walk. I tell you what, right now, if you let Vooch walk, that doesn't translate to cap space you can go out and sign somebody with. You're still at that point in time, still only using your mid-level exception. So if the Chicago Bulls are able to re-sign Vooch, are able to re-sign Kobe to something in those range of the deals that I just mentioned, they can then use their full mid-level exception and their full bi-level exception, which they probably won't, to add players to this team. Now, it's a very different order than what the Bulls did last season, in which they combined to bring in Andre Drummond and Goran Dragic at less than the mid-level exception. If you can look at this roster and you can find you a point guard that you can go out and get for $11 million, that opens some things up for the Chicago Bulls, right? That's really the Bulls' only avenue to add considerable talent in free agency this year. So we'll see. We'll see. Like, and the thing that I'd say with that is this too, is if Vooch does just walk away, if the Bulls didn't re-sign Kobe White, let's say that. Like I said, that still leaves them their mid-level exception. So the reason why I'm factoring in the re-signing of Nikola Vucevic is because you're then still adding talent. If Vooch does walk, you're then looking to use your mid-level exception just to replace and get a starting level center. If you re-sign Vooch and then use your mid-level exception, that's where you can go out and try to find your point guard. That's when you can go out and see if you can get a Trey Jones and get him away from the Spurs, or you can go out and get a Mike Conley if he's willing to come for that as a veteran to this team. And then also, let's keep in mind, and we'll talk about trades here in a second and how trades can even further that value. But that's really where the Bulls sit at. And that's really their only clear path right now to try to improve this team via free agency. It's to try to use those mid-level exceptions. Now, I know there's been some talk and some conversation around using the career-ending injury exception for Lonzo Ball. Well, it turns out with that, unless Lonzo Ball comes and says, hey, I'm going to retire, the Bulls can't file for it. So now they can file for a disabled player exception, but keep in mind the disabled player exception keeps Lonzo Ball's contracts on the books, and they still counts against the salary cap. So that means that we'd get a $10 million exception for the disabled player exception. But if we sign anybody with that, that sends us up into the luxury tax, which we know the Reinsdorfs try to avoid. Now, a different permutation of that is that, let's say Vooch does walk away. You then use your mid-level exception to sign a new center, starting level center, if you can find one at that price. You still re-sign Kobe White. And then maybe the Bulls do file for the disabled player exception, because then that would leave a little bit more of that room underneath the luxury tax for the Bulls to use that disabled player exception. Now, the disabled player exception is kind of restrictive. You can only, if you're using it in a trade, you can only trade for a player that's in the last year of their deal. Now, you can also use it to sign any free agent out there, but you can, if you're trading for a player, they have to be in the last year of their deal. So that's kind of the restrictions there with free agency for the Chicago Bulls. Now, again, it's not as restricted as it sounds. There is something that could happen. And John, I'll answer this. Question from John. He says, what about Pat Bev? Well, I'm not factoring Pat Bev into this because of what Pat Bev has said about his contract requirements. Unless Pat Bev is willing to sign for that mid-level exception money, meaning for $11 million basically per as a base salary, it doesn't seem likely that Pat Bev is going to come back. If he's serious about that, he wants $13 to $15 million per year. It's not looking likely that he's going to come back in the Chicago Bulls uniform. So that's why I didn't factor him in there. So anyone who just asked, I wanted to answer that question in case anyone asked, why didn't I factor Pat Bev into that? But that's really the Bulls salary cap situation as far as free agents. Now, it could get a little bit more creative, right? AK could go out there and trade and take back less salary. For example, we didn't have salary cap space when we signed DeMar DeRozan and Lonzo Ball. So there is absolutely a world in which he can get creative like that again and use trades, use some of these contracts that we do have to bring in talent. But again, that could branch off into a lot of different things. So I wanted to kind of keep it focused here. So that's at least the most clear path for free agency. Next up in the next segment, we're going to talk about trade. We're going to talk about trades. How can the Bulls use some of the players that they have here to facilitate trades to help improve this roster? But before we do that, I got to talk to you guys about another one of our sponsors, and that is Prize Picks. Now, Prize Picks is a very simple app. You go on there. It gives you projections on anything that you can think of. And the way that it works is that you pick 2 to 6 players, and if they go to score on more or less than the Prize Picks projections, you can win up to 25 times your money on any entry. No competing against other people. It's just you versus the projections available. PrizePicks offers projections on any sport that you watch. This includes NBA, NFL, MLB, NHL, PGA, college football, men's college basketball, women's college basketball, soccer, WNBA, which I'm super excited about the WNBA season, esports, NASCAR, and more. Literally any sport that you can think of. Entries are made in 60 seconds or less. It's just that easy. Safe and fast withdrawals, currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. Download the PrizePicks app or go to theprizepicks.com to sign up today and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code LOCKEDON. If you deposit $100, PrizePicks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, PrizePicks will give you $50. Don't forget to enter promo code LOCKEDON at sign up for instant deposit match up to $100. All right, y'all. Hey, I'm not going to lie to you. Doing the show without Pat now is weird. I solo podcast every single day of my life, about 3 times a day on Bull Central, Bear Central, and over on Chicago Sky Central. But it's just weird when my homie ain't here. But nonetheless, we're going to continue to hold it down without Pat the designer. But the last way that we're going to talk about before I go today is how the Bulls can possibly improve via trade, right? And so while AK has said that we're not going to go full rebuild, and I know that has left a lot of Bulls fans with bad taste in their mouth to hear that the Bulls will not be willing to go full rebuild, but it is what it is. Now, going full rebuild and going retool are different. So the Bulls do have a couple of situations that they can use to try to improve, albeit, yes, signing trades, right? Now, going into this, Javonte Green, even Nikola Vucevic, you could try to work out a sign and trade for those players. Now, Javonte Green, I think with how hurt he was this season, I think he's hurt that possibility. I don't think he's going to get like a huge deal to where a sign and trade kind of makes sense for all parties. But if Vooch does leave, the Bulls could absolutely try to facilitate a sign and trade so they get something back, right? Are you going to end up probably getting something major back? No. Now, the Bulls did give up a first-round pick for a sign and trade for DeMar DeRozan. So, hey, there's always that possibility. But I think after the number of first-round picks that were given out kind of this offseason and at this trade deadline, I think we're going to see kind of those be coveted a little bit more. But one of the things that we could see, LaVine or DeMar DeRozan, and I'm mentioning both of them just for fairness, right? Now, with LaVine, if the Bulls do look to move LaVine, is that looked at as a full rebuild? I think that it is, personally, just because of his age, the amount of time left on his contract. You don't have to make a decision to trade LaVine right now. I think it's more important that if you are going to try to move DeMar, that now is the time this offseason or by the trade deadline to do so, because he only has 1 year left on his deal. And so I know, seeing the Memphis Grizzlies struggle in the playoffs and things like that is brought about questions on, hey, they could be in the market for a big-time secondary scorer for them. But here's the thing, right? If the Bulls do decide to send out one of Zach LaVine or DeMar DeRozan, they're going to get something back. The biggest question is what? And before anybody gets to typing or asking and you're thinking it over, listening to the podcast side, that does not mean that you're going to get one-for-one value with DeMar DeRozan. If you're about to ask that question, well, who do we trade DeMar for that's going to replace him? That's not necessarily the plan there, right? It doesn't always work out that way. Could you? Yeah. Could you look at a Mikal Bridges? Could you look at a Cam Johnson? Could you look at I don't know, any other player? Insert name here. You could use it to try to facilitate something with the Trey Jones or something like that. But I think it's unlikely. But you could use and try to dangle out DeMar DeRozan, see what you can get back for him. But it doesn't seem like the Bulls are interested in going that way. Now, LaVine, DeMar, if they're going to trade one of the two, you guys know I'm more leaning towards DeMar just because of the things that I mentioned. 1 year left on his deal, about to be 34 years old. DeMar DeRozan probably isn't going to re-sign with the Bulls if they're still this far away from competing for a title. I know he loves the city, but I also know DeMar DeRozan wants to compete for a title. He wants a chance to win an NBA title. He has earned that right. And I don't see a realistic path in which by the end of his tenure here with the Bulls, that contract runs out, that we're that close to competing for a title. We may be closer to competing for an ECF. We may be closer to competing for a second-round playoff series, but I just don't see that. So you could look to move DeMar DeRozan. You could also look to move Zach LaVine. But some of the more important things out there as well is the players that may come available depending on how their season ends, right? You look at Dame Lillard, right? Is him in Portland going to finally decide to just end that relationship? You look at a Jaylen Brown, right? Is he available out there? As some rumors have said, I don't necessarily believe that as much as some people. But again, you never know. OG Anunoby has been a big thing that the Bulls could look to try to move DeMar for, send him back to Toronto. I personally don't believe that Toronto wants DeMar DeRozan back, but that's another thing, right? So there are trade opportunities out there for things that the Bulls do need. People have mentioned Trae Young. Please keep him and his hairline up off my team. But hey, if the Bulls try to do something to add talent there, I can't be mad. But ultimately, and a great question here. This is a great one from Sandroko. Can we get Murray from the Hawks? Now, here's the thing. Everything that I'm hearing right now seems like they'd be more willing to move Young than Murray. But I would love DeJounte Murray on this team. Love DeJounte Murray on this team. Let me be clear. I'm going to say that again. I would absolutely love DeJounte Murray on this team. I think Atlanta may hold on to him, but you never know. They gave up 3 first-round picks for him. So I don't know if that's what they're going to give up. I don't know. So, that's some of the things that the Bulls are looking for if they can try to facilitate some things in the trade market. I see, and listen, Trey Jones is not Reggie. Trey Jones is a terrible shooter. Let me be clear here. And that fit alone may be like, hey, why are we bringing him here? But as a facilitator, his assist to turnover ratio, his percentage, his ability to penetrate, I like Trey Jones on this team. Now, again, I think if we were to sign Trey Jones, I would more so want to take a look at Kobe being the starting point guard, maybe having Trey Jones come off the bench. But again, we'll have that conversation with Pat. But that is kind of where the Bulls sit right now in their ability to try to improve through the trade, right? So just to recap what we talked about today, before I send us off for today, we've talked about how the Bulls can meaningfully improve. We've talked about what they can do in getting into the draft and what that entryway may be. We've talked about what they can do in free agency, mainly with their own free agents, but to use that to create some spots to be able to go after outside free agents. And then we talked about players that they can try to acquire in the draft. Through the trade market. It all comes down to this, right? Everything that I painted, it's not like it's a clear path either way. The Bulls and the Bulls front office has a task in front of them that I do not envy at all. They have to figure out a way to improve this team without giving up too much, and I think also one of the things that I did not talk about in this, the Bulls, to me, unless they get a top 4 pick in this draft, can't give up any more first-round picks. We've given out too many first-round picks, and for a team that's just getting older and we need to get younger and quality youth, I don't think the Bulls can send out any more first-round picks. So that's kind of the stipulations of where my brain is and what the Bulls may do in the offseason. We are still very early on in this process. That first biggest domino to fall is probably going to be what they do with Vooch or with Kobe White, just to see what the size of that contract ends up being for either one of those players. But hey, let me know what you guys think down below. If you're watching this after it's live, make sure I want to hear from you guys. Leave in the comment section the target that you would like to see the Bulls go after in this offseason. Either it's a free agent, whether it's a trade target, whether it's a draft target. I want to hear who and why you want to see the Chicago Bulls. Did I say Bears earlier? I'm so on Bears draft right now. But I want to hear from you guys on who you want to see the Chicago Bulls go after this offseason. But that is it. That's my time for today. Thank you so much for tuning in to Locked On Bulls. We're going to continue delivering that fire content even during the offseason. We're not letting up. Still going to be daily. So thank you so much. You can follow me at CEO Haize. You can follow Pat at Pat the Designer. You can follow us collectively at Locked On Bulls. But that is it for us for today. Thank you for being the best part of Locked On and making Chicago Bulls your first listen every day. I'm Haize for Pat the Designer. We out. Peace, y'all.